Thank you so much for inviting me to Rethink HR to share my views on the topic of leadership in the changing times. Let us start with getting to know your speaker today. My name is Mahima Sharma. My pronouns are she, her. I'm an HR business partner with Netflix, supporting and driving strategic initiatives for finance and operations. As a global HR professional with more than a decade of diverse experience in leadership development, talent management, mergers and acquisitions, and business partner roles in Fortune 500 companies based in technology, consulting, healthcare, and now entertainment industry. My passion is centered around leveraging technology, research, and data to be able to build usable, relevant, and scalable HR solutions. I hold a master's degree from Cornell, and I'm a certified leadership coach. For today's session, let us start with understanding change management and why is it critical for leaders to lead change. I'll share a few ways on how to navigate these changes better and then share some success stories from some of these organizations where leaders have managed change very well. With the understanding of these, we'll now be able to understand better on what does the leader of the future look like and how can we make sure that we are assessing their potential to build a successful leader and a successful organization. Change management. It refers to the process of preparing, supporting, and helping individuals, teams, and organizations to make a successful transition from the current state to a desired future. It involves understanding the need for change, identifying the necessary changes, and developing and implementing strategies to facilitate and manage those changes. The goal of change management is to minimize the negative impacts that can result from changes and maximize the positive outcomes, such as increased efficiency, productivity, and competitiveness. This process can involve a range of activities, including communication, training, planning, and monitoring to ensure that the changes are successfully adopted and integrated into the organization. Change management is an essential component of effective leadership. Leaders must be able to manage change effectively to ensure that their organizations remain competitive, innovative, and responsive to changing market conditions. To manage change successfully, leaders must first develop a clear understanding of the need for change and the objectives that they hope to achieve from it. To understand the need for change, you can use market trends, you can assess your organization performance, and also identify areas of improvement for the organization. With that, it is very critical for a leader of the organization to be able to create a vision, which means the understanding of the change and breaking it down into steps for others to follow and envision. The third most critical part of change management is communicating to stakeholders. This is very critical for before the change, during the change, and after the rollout of the change. To make it successful, developing a change management plan is very important, which can cover timelines, resource allocation, risk management and strategies, and also contingency plans. One of the things that we face during change management is the resistance to change. It is very important that while you're communicating about change, while you're talking and thinking about change, you think about how would you manage the resistance to change. So engaging everyone to understand what are their concerns and getting their buy-in is very critical for a successful change management program. And all of this would be very effective and possible if you're communicating throughout the process, which is how I started, that it is key that you communicate before, during, and after the rollout. The last part, which is important, which is critical in the success, is also measuring success. We end up forgetting sometimes this aspect of the program or the plan is very critical to know that have we achieved the objectives that we set in the very beginning. And to make sure that we are measuring success, how can we start with it? We can start with the same way that we started with understanding the need for change by identifying the areas, by gathering data, analyzing the performance metrics, and then seeking feedback throughout the process. Something that feedback is very, very critical for Netflix, and something that I hold very close to my journey as well is making sure that a feedback loop is created, which means any rollout, whenever you're doing anything, whether it's a change management, whether it's rolling out a new initiative, make sure that you open a feedback loop where you're getting consistent feedback on every step that you're taking, which is before, during, and after. To make sure that you're incorporating the changes that somebody is suggesting or incorporating their feedback and also getting their buy-in during the journey. While we gather all of this feedback, another thing very critical is some of the times when something's successful during this time, it is important for us to use that after as a best practice for some of the other changes we might be going through as an organization. And the other thing can be if the current rollout is not successful, then it leaves a lesson for future. It's very important for us to think of feedback as a mechanism for us to build it and make sure that everything is iterative right now. And we'll talk more about this in the future slides as well. So I know you might be thinking, why are we talking about change management when we are here to discuss about leaders? How does a future leader look like? What are the ways that we assess leadership? Why are we talking about change management? So let's get into it. Leaders need to navigate change better for several reasons. Let's start with the first one. Change is constant. Change is inevitable. In today's fast-paced organizations and constantly evolving world, change is inevitable. Organizations that fail to adapt to change risk become obsolete. Leaders who can navigate change effectively can help their organizations stay relevant and competitive. The second point, change is disruptive. Change can be very disruptive, can create uncertainty, anxiety among employees. So leaders who can navigate change effectively can minimize the negative impacts of change and can also help their employees feel more secure and confident during periods of transition. Change can create opportunities. Change can also help with growth and development in terms of opportunities. Leaders who can navigate change effectively can identify and capitalize on these opportunities, not only to help, but to drive innovation and improve organizational performance. And lastly, change can be very costly. Poorly managed change can impact the cost. It can be costly both in terms of time and resources. Leaders who navigate change effectively can help their organization save time and money by implementing changes more effectively and efficiently. So in a nutshell, leaders who navigate change effectively are better equipped to lead their organizations through period of transition, uncertainty, minimize the negative impact, and capitalize on opportunities for growth and development. I hope this slide helps understand why we were talking about change management, the criticality of change management, and effectiveness of change management for a leader. Now that we've covered what is change management, the need for it, the importance of it in leadership styles, it'll be good for us to now look at some of the ways that we can navigate change better as a leader. Let's start with identifying gaps. The way a leader can identify the gaps can be between the existing systems and processes that are already in place within the organization. Again, analyzing data seems to be one of the most critical skill set that is required to identify gaps, to identify the areas of opportunity. Another way that you can identify the gaps can be gathering feedback, again, being open to input from different stakeholders, and conducting gap analysis to identify areas of improvement. Once you've identified these areas of improvement, now is our plan to start creating a roadmap, which means that you create clear timelines, identify goals, identify objectives that need to be achieved, and how would you be communicating some of those changes that you're bringing through? So the strategies around communicating changes are also developed through a roadmap. Now, with identifying objectives and gaps, now that we have created a roadmap, let's talk about collaborating and communicating. Since a change is never done in silo, it's done across amongst different functions and levels of organization. You need to make sure that you engage your stakeholders, whether it's employees, customers, suppliers, whoever it may be. Make sure that you're collaborating, engaging, and communicating with all of them, like I shared before. The fourth part would be building in flexibility. Accommodate changing circumstances and evolving needs so that you're able to adapt to the change quickly. Build in mechanisms for ongoing review and adjustments to ensure that they remain aligned with the changing environment. For example, COVID, right? I mean, during COVID, we had all of these policies, processes that we were used to. We had to evolve all of them to make sure that we were relevant for the market. We were relevant for the stakeholders. We had to work from home suddenly. A lot of the jobs that we couldn't have ever thought of, ever considered working from home, we suddenly were working from home and making it work very effectively. Let's go on to the next one, which is leverage technology. It means the leaders need to kind of work on automating processes, make sure that we're reducing redundancies, we're streamlining workflows to increase our efficiency and productivity. We need to make sure that we're reducing risk of errors and inconsistencies while doing all of this. The last part, which I think is very critical for the success of navigating change, is monitoring and measuring. So all the areas that we identified during the step one of identifying gaps, or the objectives that we identified while we were developing a roadmap, we need to make sure that we're ensuring some ways of measuring the success of those. So we are measuring or ensuring that we are achieving the intended goals and objectives that we identified in the first step. Whether it is through KPIs, the key performance indicators, or KRAs, OKRs, however each organization identifies the development and measurement of these. And making sure, again, I can't emphasize enough on making sure that we have this regular input or intake of feedback and reviews. So we are identifying what are our areas of improvement, and we are correcting course while we are doing that. Some of the organizations do a great job at one or a few of these steps. I've seen some companies that over-index on technology or kind of building flexibility, but not too effective on measuring the success or measuring and monitoring. And I think from a leadership perspective, one of the most development that I've seen in areas is around communication. So after developing the roadmap, making sure that we're collaborating and communicating in a way that all stakeholders are involved, getting their feedback, getting their buy-in, and making sure that you're keeping them abreast of everything that we're working on. With this, let's talk about some of the examples of successful change management stories by the leaders that resulted in some positive outcomes. I'm sure you've heard of a few of these, and I would love to hear from all of you if you have any successful change management stories from either yourself, your leaders, or you've seen it within the organization on some of the things that your leaders have done that have resulted in some positive outcomes. Let's start with IBM here. As you know, IBM underwent a major transformation in the 1990s. The CEO at that point was able to successfully lead the change effort. He brought in new leadership to focus on customer needs and implemented new technology and business processes. As a result, IBM's revenue grew from 64 billion in 93 to 88 billion in 2002. And as is very evident, the company emerged as a leader in technology in the tech industry. Procter & Gamble. In early 2000, P&G also went through a major restructuring under the CEO at the time. He implemented a new corporate strategy focused on innovation and collaboration, and reorganized the company around global business units, GBUs as we may call it. This change effort resulted in creating increased efficiencies and improved profitability and a higher stock price. Third example, Ford Motor Company. All of you must have heard about this. In 2006, Ford Company was struggling to stay competitive in the auto industry, and then the CEO at the point led a major change effort, very similar to IBM. They kind of involved streamlining the company's operations, focusing on quality, and investing in new technology. As a result, Ford was able to avoid bankruptcy during the 2008 financial crisis, and since then has become one of the most successful automakers in the world. So with these examples, it illustrates how effective change management by leaders can result in improved organizational performance, increased competitiveness, and sustainable growth. Now that we have this understanding of the ever-changing environment, some of the challenges, and the success stories of change management, I believe we would have a fair idea of what are some of the competencies and or skill sets or requirements that are needed for a leader of the future. So let's get into it. Leader of the future would be someone who possesses a unique blend of skills, characteristics, values that enable them to lead effectively in this rapidly changing environment. Let's start with the first one, agility and adaptability, right? A leader who's able to adapt quickly, make decisions, and rapidly solve complex problems in a very uncertain, ambiguous environment is what we would need in the future. Somebody who's able to, who's comfortable with the ambiguity and uncertainty and is able to think creatively and flexibly in a rapidly evolving environment. Second would be technology literacy, right? I mean, able to leverage technology to drive innovation and productivity. We're all hearing about ChatGPT nowadays. Just how can a leader be aware of what is it that is driving the environment right now? What is it that can drive innovation and create increased productivity within the organization, and understand the emerging technology and how can we leverage it for the betterment of the organization? Third is empathy and an emotional intelligence. I think this is has increased weightage, especially in the last couple of years with pre, during, and post-COVID environment. It is very important for a leader to be able to connect with and understand the needs of diverse range of stakeholders, whether it is, I would say, needs of high level of empathy and emotional intelligence, and the ability to listen actually and learn from others, and that openness to actually learn from others is what the leader of future would require. Inclusivity and diversity. As the world is growing, we are being more global, and we have, it is increased importance for us, more important for us to have inclusivity and diversity, to embrace them as our core values. A very simple example that we use here at Netflix around how to differentiate between inclusive and diversity is diversity is being invited to a party, and inclusivity is being asked to dance. This is something I always love to share with my leaders on what does it mean to be inclusive and what does it mean to be diverse, and how important it is to make sure that you're both to have a great experience for an employee. So The other one would be making sure that you're creating an environment that fosters collaboration and innovation among the diverse perspectives. You're creating that environment where everybody is able to bring their authentic self to work, and they're able to share some different perspectives that people might have not thought through, and can actually foster a lot of collaboration and innovation. The last one, I think, is absolutely critical for us for a future sustainability and social responsibility. This is very close to my heart. I actually make sure that the leader that I'm developing, I'm incorporating this aspect as a critical development area for them. This would mean for the leaders to be very socially aware and very aware of their approach that they're taking, whether it is a long-term solution or a short-term goal. What are they thinking about? Making sure that they're balancing the requirements and achievements out of the long-term and short-term goals. They have this deep understanding of the social and environmental impacts of their business decisions, and emphasizing on the ethical practices that we have during the business decisions, right? A lot of these that I shared today have always existed as a requirement for great leader. Like, they've always been there. Whether you talk about inclusivity, whether you talk about empathy, technology, agility, all of this has always existed. But it's actually the order of preference that I've seen has evolved, whether it's prioritizing empathy right now because we're going through an environment which requires leaders to be more empathetic, or sustainability that is more required in this environment. It's always the change in the order of preference that has shifted with the evolution of this ever-changing environment. So let's talk about assessing leadership potential. Now that we have an idea of change management, we've talked about the need for change management, we've talked about what does a leader of the future look like, we've understood the challenges and success stories. Let's talk about how do we assess our leaders. Organizations with the changing in the environment, they also need to make sure that they're evolving their methods of identifying and developing their future leaders, right? Let's start with a few. I have a few here. And again, I would love to hear from all of you if there's anything else that you're leveraging, anything else that you've benefited from as a leader yourself, or the leaders that you've developed. Would love to hear your thoughts as well. I would like to start with the first one, which is leadership potential programs. They're generally designed to identify and develop future leaders. It's a combination of assessments, you use trainings, development activities, and maybe pre and post mentorship opportunities. The second one, which is most commonly used, are 360-degree feedbacks, where you gather feedback from your peers, your stakeholders, your managers, subordinates, everybody around, which are then used to identify your strengths and your areas of opportunities, and sometimes blind spots, which I love to explore when it comes to feedback. Competency assessments is the third one. There are a few companies who do this in-house or have external vendors helping them to assess this. I worked with organizations in both categories. So I worked with an organization where we created an in-house competency framework and in-house assessment as well, to evaluate leaders on those competencies and the values of the organization. And then I've worked with an organization where we had an external vendor who customized it for us to suit our organizational requirements of values and competencies. These assessments are generally used to assess your skills and behaviors that you, as an organization, think are effective leadership examples. Examples can be communication skills, strategic thinking ability, emotional intelligence, as I just shared before. Very similar to competency assessments, we have something called behavioral assessments. These are important to identify, useful to identify personality traits associated with effective leadership. These are personality tests which, if done and when done, can help you identify how does this leader operate and what kind of leadership skills or skill set does this leader have, and then how can how do they visualize risk taking? How do they visualize adaptability? How good are they at in certain situations? And knowing this can help you develop them and prepare them for situations, and also identify if they are a fit or not. And the last would be simplest way to assess leadership potential. Age-old method is the performance assessment, which some of the organizations probably are not using anymore. Is where you analyze your past performance reviews, you talk about your KRAs, what have you done, what have you achieved, and evaluating the ability to meet your targets and goals. And then also something for leaders would be important around work ethics and reliability and the trust factor that you build. So with all of this, I would say sometimes we end up using one or two or a combination of all of these to assess the potential of leaders. And it's critical that we understand that as the world changes, as the market changes, as the organizations evolve, we need to evolve with them and understand which of these, whether it's one, whether it's a combination of these, are the right way to assess and develop our leaders, to make sure that we are not just developing the right leaders, but also making sure that we're developing the leaders that are required for a successful future organization. With that, I would like to say thank you. Thank you so much for your time. Please feel free to reach out through LinkedIn, and I would love to hear your thoughts and feedback on these slides. Thank you.